I'm Keith Boesky. I've been in the game business for a very, very, very long time, longer than most of you have been born, and my underwear is probably older than most of you as well. Jessica called up and asked me to put the panel together, and she mentioned CEOs. And like I said, self-indulgent, I'm thinking, what would be a great dinner party? And how can I get these people that I don't see very often, but I respect very much, to come in and talk about their experiences in the business? And these are the guys that came to mind. I've worked with Pete for a very long time, with Peter for a long time. I've known Dan forever. I don't even know when that happened. Steve just told me when we met, and I've known Ted for a very long time as well. We work on two different sides of the coin. I'm on the parasitic side where I don't do anything, and they're on the actual doing shit side, which I admire very much. The other thing that they've done very well is Ted's been in business, he just told me, 24 years. You're coming up on, which those of you who are developers know what that is. Yeah, that does.
Impressive. That's really impressive.
That deserves a boatload more than just applause. That is, you've been doing this 12 times longer than I've ever done anything as a job. Steve's at Turtle Rock. They'll introduce themselves. And I asked Dan to be on the panel as the publisher guy, or the black hat guy. The interesting thing, and what I mentioned to other people, what I mentioned to Dan, the reason I wanted him on the panel is we all know a lot of publishing executives, and a lot of publishing executives have been in the same place for a very long time. No offense, Bill, but when the publishing executive is at a single publisher for 20 years, if you're at Activision for 20 years, you may think you know how the business works, but you know how Activision works. You went to a different publisher, so it's not all you, Bill. Yeah. So Dan's been at EA, Activision, Disney, Warner, and now Amazon. So I think he has a great overview of the business, and it's going to be great to get his perspective of how he sees things relative to how developers see things. Peter was the founder of Treyarch and is now Skydance Interactive. They're all working on different platforms. They came in at subsequent generations. And one of the themes that I've seen, one of the reasons that I've been able to pay my mortgage and put my kid through college, is that there's only one cycle in the game business that tends to repeat itself. So if I just stand in one place, the whole world keeps walking by over and over again. So I never have to learn anything new. And that I kind of want to bring that out with these guys to understand where we are in the market today and how that's different, especially as the elder gentleman, Ted, can tell us from when he started, they used to use stones and tablets to pound the games out.
Exactly. We used graph paper, actually. We did.
So
for the first game. So.
And little runners that went back and forth, and fax machines too.
We had floppy disks. Yes.
I sat in a meeting when I was at IDOS. They asked us, I got invited to meet with Steve Jobs to talk about bringing Tomb Raider to the iMac. And I remember how nutty it was. We couldn't believe he showed us his iMac, and he said there's going to be no floppy. And I was like, are you out of your mind? No floppy? Yeah. Oh yeah, floppies, they're going to die. We're going to kill them. So I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves. But one of the things I was thinking about is I'd like you to tell you when you introduce yourself, after you tell us what you're doing. Everybody knows already, but after you tell us what you're doing, what's the game that you wish you made? And what's the game that made you want to get into the business and build games? But you don't get to say that. So Dan, you have to tell us what the game is that you turned down. What's your biggest regret that you turned down? I'll tell you, I turned down Grand Theft Auto.
That's easy for me.
So
League of Legends.
Everybody did that.
Well, you asked for one.
I represented those guys. Everybody turned it down.
Right.
Okay.
I remember when they came in because Mitch obviously was a family member at Activision. Worked very closely with Bill and his team, and Mitch came in and had talked to Bobby, and I think probably felt like a pretty smooth transition into finding a way to find a deal. But at that time, it looked pretty close to just being a conventional RTS. And in those, I don't know what year it was, 2005, 2006 maybe. Mm-hmm. So RTS was struggling as a genre. We didn't have a business model at Activision that worked for RTS at that time, other than the X-Men stuff that we'd done before. And so it killed me, but I'm like, oh man, this is such a cool thing. But we don't have a business model. I'm sorry, we can't do anything with this. And then about a month later, I went to the Montgomery conference where they got their first seed round, and I went to their talk. And, I love developers, so I wanted to go over and congratulate them. So I went over and said, hey, listen, guys, congratulations. They said, thank you very much. By the way, okay. And then they kind of excused me. I went about my business. But League of Legends certainly is the one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ted, game you wish you made. First of all, tell us who you are, what you're doing with the...
I'm Ted Price. I am at Insomniac Games. I started the company about 24 years ago. And we mostly focus on console games, big AAA console games. And we also, though, are in VR. We've released 3 VR games in the last couple of years and are exploring sort of the competitive VR space, because we have a game out where you are competing with each other, with another person in VR, which is fun. It's your Magic Caster. It's called Unspoken. But as far as the game that I wish I'd made, when I think about at Insomniac how we've been influenced by other games over the years, I think to me Metroid and Super Metroid, I kind of equate them, are the ones that have had the biggest influence on what we've done over the years, just because they were such well-designed games. A lot of us played them at some point in our youth, and their influences across our Ratchet games, Sunset Overdrive, even Resistance, and dare I say even Spider-Man that we're making, just because we look to those design lessons that really don't get old in this industry, because the guys who were working on that game were brilliant, and they forged the way for many of us.
I don't know if you realize you have Spider-Man in common with
I know.
us.
We were talking about it earlier. Yeah.
Steve.
Steve Goldstein. I am the general manager at Turtle Rock Studios. We're an independent developer in Orange County. We made Left 4 Dead and followed that up with Evolve. Now we're working on a new game project, as well as doing a lot of VR. We have 2 VR teams in addition to the game team. The game, I think, that influenced me most, and it's really interesting because I played games for a long time, got started in the 2600 days, played, kind of dropped off, but then got back into it with Diablo. And a friend of mine said, you gotta try this out, and sat me in front of his computer, and 16 hours later, he came back, and I was still there, and that was I don't know if that was really a good moment for me. It was kind of gross, actually, but I loved that game so much, and the way that it worked, the way that you would level your character up, the way that loot was just dropping all over the place and all that, it really stuck with me. And then when I was a practicing attorney, got the opportunity to represent that team that made that game when they became Flagship Studios. And really that moment where I got to work not only with my heroes as far as game development was concerned, but also that kind of launched my career, not only as an attorney in the games industry, but then also becoming internal at Flagship, and later down the line winding up going internal again with Turtle Rock. So it was a huge influence.
Cool. Peter?
So been at games for quite a while. Got into it in college programming, working for a little company called not Minecraft, but Mindcraft Software, working on this charming series called The Magic Candle, an Ultima knockoff, and eventually started a company called Treyarch with a good friend of mine who had worked there. We co-founded that studio. Obviously, that turned out well. Our flagship title was a game called Die by the Sword, this crazy free-form sword-fighting game that no one has ever really made anything like since. And there's a reason for that. But it had some adherence still. You can still find it. Obviously, that we did a whole bunch of games for Activision. The final one being Spider-Man 2, shortly before I left there, which obviously is one we're tremendously proud of. After being out of games for a couple of years, one of the first employees with Treyarch, I had started Treyarch with Don Koslu, and then one of my first employees, Chris Bussey, there, and I partnered up to start the workshop in 2007. We ran that independently for 7 years. We made Sorcery for the PlayStation Move, and a bunch of other stuff, finally with some work on Gears of War and XCOM. And then 2016, we became part of Skydance, and Workshop became Skydance Interactive. And we just earlier this year launched our first 2 games under that aegis, which is our longtime shooter Pwned, and our flagship VR title, Archangel. And now our studio is wholly focused on VR going forward. It's been announced that we're working on a Walking Dead VR title, which is incredibly exciting, and I can say nothing about it, no matter how much you dig. But it's like right now, we're just enjoying the joy of the first tracks through the powder of VR right now as it continues to fall. You know, the market is the market when it'll come when it comes, but oh my gosh, as a developer, to be in that playground is just fantastic.
So you hit on...
So I didn't get to say the game yet, though.
You didn't say the name.
Of the game I wish I had made.
Oh, yeah, tell me your game.
So I was thinking of my various regrets in life. I've got numerous of them. Working on a proto-RTS game and then seeing Dune 2 for the first time and the, oh my God, we're doing it wrong moment. Working on Die by the Sword and then seeing Quake launch and oh my God, we're doing it wrong. I think the one I'd have to highlight would be Ultima Underworld. You know, one Looking Glass Legendary.
It's got to be Boesky clapping.
Talk about a game that just blew my mind as it immersed me in this dungeon. Like every bit of my childhood fantasies of Dungeons and Dragons, everything I'd imagined, every sewer tunnel I'd ever crawled through suddenly was there. And I was in this thing. The moment of seeing a campfire and this dark shape going in front of it, realizing it was a person pacing back and forth as I got closer, and just mind-blowing. Like, the music still runs through my head of this game. This definitely was an inspiration when we went to create Die by the Sword at a later time, and had a poignant moment after Die by the Sword where I think it's long enough ago I could just say this. We actually had contact Origin Systems. They were looking for somebody to do Ultima Underworld 2. And Garriott himself, Lord British, one of my, again, oh my God, I'm talking to Lord British. I'd never spoken to him outside of an Ultima 3 map. And now here's the actual guy in my office talking to us about maybe doing Ultima Underworld 2, which was this moment of near miss as I get in there and tell him how we're going to rewrite our whole engine. And he said, yeah, that's a really good idea, maybe not. But he'd played Die by the Sword and admired it. So yeah. Definitely, if there was a game I ever could have made, Ultima Underworld or Ultima Underworld 2.
You know, you brought up two things. I want to get into, you know, how you guys see yourselves as independents and what do you think the role is. But you brought something up that I think plays interesting into questions for Dan. You know, 2 points. First, when you were making the pitch, and this is where I want to go with each one of you about pitching these things to get money, because getting money for independence is ridiculously hard, and getting that confidence level, especially now when the cost, I think the budget for Tomb Raider, total investment was $900,000. It was budgeted for $6 million. The biggest deal that I did when I was at IDOS was I made a commitment for $1.8 million to publish Final Fantasy VII on the PC. That was the biggest authorized check that we wrote. So that's the scale of what we were doing at the time. Now, when you put together Die by the Sword, you thought that it was a really, really good idea and would be appealing to the market to have a physically accurate 3D sword fighting game where every limb could be cut off individually.
Still sounds good, doesn't it? Right? You're buying, cool. Signing up for it. Look at them.
Okay, so now Dan, as a publisher, at the time, they ended up with Interplay. If they had pitched that to you, how would you analyze? Would that be compelling, or is there something else that you would want to know besides it's going to be really cool?
I mean, it might be compelling. You know, I mean, there are a lot of titles that innovate and try something new that didn't have a model before.
But is that the hook?
I don't know. I think that, you know, there's a series of discussions that happens when the pitches are going forward, right? So first and foremost, we always try to focus on talent. So obviously, Peter and his team, very talented team, so that would get the attention of a publisher to the point where we'd sit down and have a discussion. Talent always wins out. You can always find a creative solution if you're a talented team, in my opinion. And so a lot of the things that we did, and I hate to speak so much about Activision because I really shouldn't speak about their business, but when I was there, you know, we disproportionately focused on talent. And, you know, that's how the Bungie deal happened and the Bizarre Creations deal happened. And frankly, the Bungie deal was one of those things where it didn't matter what they were going to work on. We just respected their talent level so incredibly.
Okay, so this is a first-time developer. They come to you and they say they're going to do this, and the hook in the game is this.
Okay.
That's the feature. What are we selling you?
You changed the criteria.
Well, I'm trying to get. Well, they were a first-time developer.
I was on a roll.
They were a first-time developer because
I was on a roll there. You changed the criteria right in the middle of my pitch.
I know. I know, because you're going the nice way, and I'm trying to get the truth out. Well, I mean, the other thing, let's get to the other side of it, to make you not the nasty guy, make you the prescient guy, is he mentioned Walking Dead.
Yes.
You published the first Walking Dead game. When this was a non-obvious thing, Activision bought the license for a TV show.
Through Minneapolis, yes.
So what made that decision happen? Of all of the,
Opportunistic. For that decision then, through Minneapolis, and as I don't know if everyone knows, but Activision had two different publishing models. One was a primary publishing model that happened out of Santa Monica, which is the same organization that brings to you Call of Duty and Destiny, and we did Blur with Bizarre Creations, and there are a number of titles in the slate that come from Santa Monica. In addition to that, we had what I would call an opportunistic publishing model out of Minneapolis. And it was all about securing licenses that we thought could carry the draft of a title through retail. And there was a time...
But this was a pretty young license at the time.
Yeah, but...
season 1 or 2.
Yeah, but they had already had a little bit of success in the social space on the PC. They had a rabid, loyal following from their user base, their customers or their fans. All indications said that this was worth doing something with. I think the challenge that we faced was by the time we secured the license, there wasn't enough time to deliver a quality game. And
which is pretty typical with a license. That's not an unusual problem, I should say.
It is, unfortunately, very typical. I think now, companies like Disney and Warner and Universal are getting out in front of it a little bit more because they're planning 3 to 5 years out, and they're securing licenses that are more evergreen than just opportunistic.
The movies are taking longer to make, too.
That's right.
It used to be only at 12 months. Now,
and film studios, as you know, are building franchises where you've got a 1, a 2, and a 3, and a 4, where you can feed into the universe of that IP without having to do in the old days of Disney, we loved following the story of the movie.
Right.
Right? You have a level that's cinematic from the film that sets up this first level. The next level is exactly that, and you live through the moment, all authentic voice and music, and then the capper is a reward for having completed that level, which then launches you into the next level.
Okay, so now this is good because I was going in a different direction, but you took me back over here.
Yeah, I got that.
So we're just having a conversation. If anybody wants to ask a question, you should do that too. Otherwise, I'm just going to go off and entertain myself with these guys. So he just told you what they're doing. Ted, you got one of the biggest franchises in the world now. And there's a big canon in comics, and there's a canon in film, and there's all of this. So where are you drawing the story? Where's it coming from? And what are the parallels? I mean, is Marvel influencing you of what, obviously they're watching.
Yeah, one of the reasons
how'd you make the decision to do it? And Peter, I want to know from you too. Because you have had the same franchise. But Ted.
Well, just as background, we've always created our own IP from the very beginning. And when Sony actually came by and said, hey, we have a relationship with Marvel. And they have been asking us about Insomniac and whether you guys would be interested in working on a Marvel property. And my first reaction was sort of neutral, because to be honest, I wasn't a comic book reader growing up, and I went and started asking other Insomniac, what do you guys think about this? Marvel's huge, their movies are just killing it, but we make our own IP. And the answer I got was, are you stupid? Of course we should work on a Marvel game. And so the part of a lot of the conversation was centered around where the idea comes from. And Marvel made it very clear that the only reason they really wanted to work with us because they didn't want to write the story. They wanted Insomniac to bring its creativity, its innovations, its thoughts to a game. And they said, we have this whole world of heroes. Go ahead and choose which one you guys think you'd be most well suited to, which is an amazing opportunity. So it was a no-brainer for most of the team, Spider-Man, because his demeanor matches sort of our values at Insomniac. And
are they giving you a version of Spider-Man in time, or they just go?
We said, what do you guys want to do with Spider-Man? Which, again, an amazing opportunity, which everybody appreciates. And so we huddled up and we came back with our thoughts for an original Spider-Man story, one that's not connected to comics, not connected to a movie or anything else that Marvel was doing, because that to me was the way to keep the team inspired, and to feel like this is something that we can put our mark on and create a sort of unique twist for to that character. And along the way, we work arm in arm with Marvel. Their folks are great, and they come in, and what's awesome about that relationship is, as you probably know from working with the Walking Dead guys, is they'll help you understand the background.
Right.
Hey, Peter Parker might not do this, or this particular villain this is his background, so you guys can understand his motivations a little bit better and present him in an authentic way. But aside from that, they've been really hands-off and many times just super collaborative.
Yeah. So you were on, Spider-Man 1 was off a movie, wasn't it?
Yeah, both of them actually.
So did you,
Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2.
were you tracking the movie story, or did you guys come up with something independent?
When we dove onto Spider-Man 1, we had to be pretty conservative. This is the tightly controlled schedule of when the movies come in. You don't miss that party. Obviously, the game you would love to make gets sacrificed to it had better ship day and date with a movie. So that was creativity in a pretty narrow box when we made the first Spider-Man. That earned us the right, and so we had levels that were derived from movie scenes, and it was we had kind of limited access to stuff. wasn't the optimal setup,
Right.
but we showed up on time, and it was a huge commercial success, which gives you some leeway on the second one. A bunch of the crazy ideas, the crazy physical swinging and such that we'd had in the initial Spider-Man, in Spider-Man 2 that became the canonical thing of the franchise. We'd invented that back on Spidey 1, but it was clear that was going to take a long time to come to bear.
Were you guys thinking about story?
Yeah, of course we did, and I think we did some wonderful things with story, especially in Spidey 2, the way we wove like the Black Cat side story into sort of the essence of what was the story from the movie, the way we took an open world and managed to take movie events and string them through it and yet give you the freedom to play in the open world Manhattan. I think we did some really innovative and wonderful things there, honestly. I think that was kind of a great success, but I will acknowledge that at the core of what Treyarch was at that time, tech and gameplay were our sort of our guiding lights, and we're a stronger force. But we had a very good relationship with Raimi and with the, both with Marvel people and with the film people on that. Got access to stuff at the right times. I think it helped to be on a second round product.
I think that was the
some
state of
trust
the industry at the
in
time.
the bank.
I mean, if you built the greatest gameplay in the world and a shit story, you sold a lot. If you had the greatest story in the world and shit gameplay, you sold nothing.
Well, it was some excellent gameplay, and it was definitely not a shit story.
Yeah. So Ted, you said the same thing in the hall, but I read this in an interview where you said that as an industry, we're being forced to become comfortable with, or at least accept the change will be constant for us. And then Steve said that one of those changes is that when you look at the console environment, there's no longer space for independent developers to work in. Not proper English, but you were talking.
It's an achievement in itself these days.
Publishers don't want to make bets on new IP given the cost of development. And if they're going to make a new IP for console, they're probably going to do it internally just because they feel they can control those costs better. Remember saying that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Both of you are making, other than this exception you made, both of you are making original IP for publishers externally. So how are you getting that done? How are you getting them to make those commitments to you for a new IP, big launch title? You came out with Evolve, and that was just...
Well, I mean, keep in mind that, actually, we probably shared a similar situation with original IP when Evolve came out and then when Sunset Overdrive came out, right? Yeah. And the issue isn't just whether the publisher is going to greenlight something like that, but at least when it came to Evolve, we were pushing against headwinds every step of the way because we're coming out with a product that did not cost as much as the Destinies and Call of Duties and Assassin's Creeds and every other franchise that's coming out, right? So, one, we're coming out at a price point that's the same as those price points, but, the budgets on those titles are over $100 million. And two, we have to establish a brand, whereas those brands already exist, right? And even though we were at E3 and Gamescom and, we're winning awards all over the place and the industry's thinking, wow, this title's going to be amazing. You're going to sell a bazillion units. It's going to be fantastic. You come up to an average kid on the street and they had not heard of Evolve.
But you could,
right?
What I'm looking at is you convinced Take-Two to give you a boatload of money.
We didn't convince Take-Two. Take-Two decided it was a good purchase in the bankruptcy of THQ. We convinced THQ because THQ needed new IP.
But I mean, this isn't like me paying $200,000 for some PS1 game. This is like the scene from Scarface, where they're walking in with duffel bags of money over their shoulders, saying, "Build me a game." How do you get it sold? I mean, that's what everybody as an independent wants to know.
Okay.
It's second nature to Ted by now, but this was your first game.
It was our second game, right?
Yeah.
And that's the only reason we got the deal.
Right.
Because we were the team that made Left 4 Dead, right? But even when we were the team that made Left 4 Dead, which seems like it should be a no-brainer, meeting with every single publisher, they start checking boxes, right? Which is, how big is the team? Oh, there's 12 people. They're going to have to be over 100. Well, that's a negative, right? And it goes down the list. What's their tech team like? They don't have much of a tech team. Well, that gets checked off too. So we were in a situation where even though we had all of these negatives stacked against us because it was a small team and we knew we were going to have to scale rapidly, a couple publishers were interested in the concept. THQ in particular needed a slate. They didn't have anything at that time, right?
So it's desperation. You found the desperate guy and you took advantage of him.
I mean,
Hey, whatever works, man. I mean,
look,
times are tough.
we had aligned interests.
Yeah.
So, we were very fortunate that they wanted to make that bet on us, and we wound up delivering because we actually, put out a project that was well received amongst critics and the people that understood the game, because it was a very complex game at the end of the day, that understood the game really loved it. But it took a publisher that needed that new IP, then that publisher going under, and having another publisher pick it up in order to get that project out the door.
So, Ted, every developer that I've ever worked with, going back 25 years, always gets in the business to make their own IP.
Right.
And 90% of them take in work for hire to fund getting to the point of making their own IP. You've always made your own original IP.
We've been very lucky.
Okay. So now I think that there's a little bit of skill in there too. So what goes into the pitch? How are you making the presentation? Or what do you think is contributing to that success of getting a publisher to buy into your vision of this original IP?
It really changes it changes depending on who you're pitching to and your prior relationship with them. I mean, and again, we got into the business very early at a good time. And the first game we made, Disruptor, which nobody even has heard of, our pitch was Al Hastings, who was one of the original team members, co-founders with me, had built this engine in our tiny office, and I did some art, and we recorded it, put it on a videotape, and we drove up and down the West Coast, walking into every publisher we could find. We literally cold called everybody. And in every single situation, they kicked us out because they had the same checklist back then too, which was, you guys are 2 people.
And was the budget for that?
Was a budget for that? I think it was $250,000. That was my back of the napkin estimate, and I had no idea what we'd actually spend on it. So yeah, it was me guessing at pretty much everything. But we got turned down everywhere, and it wasn't until we went to, last gasp, went up to Universal and met Mark Cerny, who had just been hired as the executive producer for the fledgling Universal Interactive Studios, that we got the chance. But that was luck, being able to find that opportunity. And once we had made that first game, it gave us enough. Well, actually, we did a 3-game deal, so that really was the turning point.
That doesn't happen.
They used to do that. People used to do that.
Yeah, that doesn't. Well, and also, but at the time that you were making that trip, I'm sure you met with, at least 10 to a dozen companies.
Yeah.
Right? And now I'm looking at a situation where agents telling me I got to go to DICE and spend 2 days in Vegas. I'm like, what for? I'm going to have 3 meetings. Because there's maybe maybe 4 companies that can finance a title of the size that we make, right? And so I think that's another factor. And I think that the fact that you're doing a licensed IP is a really smart move, because you're going to get all the momentum of being associated with Spider-Man.
Okay, so now
right?
when you're talking about this, and we're talking about making the title and then moving on to the next title, one of the other things that we're seeing in this business, and I've heard it from another publisher, I had a conversation with somebody who was telling me that they map out the revenue that comes in a mobile game, and a mobile game player is paying about $100 to $120 a year. And if we're looking at franchise IP, like the kind of things that you guys make, where you're come into the market once every 2 years, and your consumer is paying $30 a year. They're working on closing the gap through games as a service and stuff like that. Are you changing the nature? You have to change the nature of the game, but are also changing the way that you're thinking about building games and supporting them to move into this model of shorter installments and updating a platform as opposed to a releasing of sequelized versions or serialized versions of the game?
I think everybody has to be thinking about that. I mean, that's just the way this business is moving right now. But at the same time, if you've established a brand that is known for doing a specific type of game, you can get away with not having to jump on that bandwagon. I mean, in terms of moving away potentially from the $60 model or relying heavily on games as a service, because we found that when we move away from our core strengths, we don't do as well. We were talking about this before, we were in the mobile business. In other words, we made 4 mobile titles and we got our asses handed to us because we had moved away from what we knew how to do. And our fan base, the fan base in mobile had no idea who we were. Insomniac, I've never heard those guys. And even though we put out games that were rated well, we just got killed because we didn't know monetization. We didn't know all the tricks of the trade. So we went back to doing what we do. And my only advice, if you are pitching a game, this kind of goes back to what you were asking me earlier, is you got to play to your strengths and prove to the publisher or whoever you're pitching to that you are the best suited team to do this game that's going to blow people's minds. And I think a good idea always wins if you can surprise people with it, regardless of the budget.
And commitment to that idea.
Yeah, exactly, because people can see that. Your own team can smell that. If you are pitching something internally and you're saying, we're doing this because we want to make a lot of money, or we're doing this because the market's evolving this way, or games as a service is going to be big, it doesn't feel authentic, right? Your team has got to, you have, as the driver of the team, have to believe it in your heart that this is going to be the game that, changes people's lives. And I think when that happens, you have that opportunity.
Yeah. So Dan, over the years at the different places, everybody has a different analysis system internally. Some are numbers driven, some are whatever. What is the most common misconception that you've seen from people coming in to pitch you? Where a developer will assume this is a slam dunk and this is the reason Dan's going to say yes, and they're just way off or it doesn't fit.
I think it's changed through the years, right? So a number of years ago, call it 20 years ago. I don't know about 20 years ago, just so you know, but I read a lot. And so 20 years ago, I heard that the model for getting a publishing deal was different. I think that then it was about benchmarking. You do a base case, you do a downside, you do an upside. You try to forecast how many units are going to sell. You give yourself some criteria that says it has to be X amount of revenue, or else we just respectfully say no. And at most publishers, that is a fundamental commonality. It just is the way that the due diligence process works. So let's say
did you find that difficult? If you were really excited about a new genre, like you talked about League of Legends, but that was hard because it was similar to others.
Sure.
But if you saw something that was truly breakout, original, new genre, so you couldn't forecast it,
sure.
Did you find it difficult to sell into?
Yeah, there are a number of ideas and pitches that came in to us, no matter what publisher I personally was with, that spark a passion. And then what you do is you go and you work with the developer and you say, I need tools, because I need to pitch this up the channel. It's not just me, if you get me, I'm just a guy, right? But every publisher has an organization of people who make the decision collectively. And so let's say that an idea comes in. Peter comes in with his sword idea. And for some reason, I love this idea. I can't get over it. I'm crazy over this idea. So I put the package together that then I'm going to take to, I'll call it the panel, different publishers have different sizes of panels. In the old days at Activision, I was talking to Bill Anchor about, the size. It used to be 4 or 5 people in a room. Pretty simple. You get passion behind it. Sometimes they go, hey, you believe that much in it? Go. Later, when the risks are higher, and I read something a couple days ago that says that, I don't know if this is confirmed or not, that there is a belief that it takes 10 times more to spend on a AAA title in the console space now than it did a few years ago. I can't confirm that.
I
You
think
guys
that's,
would
I
know
think
I would just-
that's a low estimate.
Based on experience, that's
Yeah, that's a
absolutely
low
the
estimate.
case.
Which means that it's a higher risk proposition for a publisher who's going to talk about the advance, marketing dollars, distribution, all these things.
Okay, so now this is where I get confused.
Yep.
When I was a publisher, and every contract that you guys sign, I'm assuming, I've never seen one of yours, there's a termination for convenience provision with a kill fee. So if I'm a publisher and I sign a $40 million game,
Yeah.
I'm signing the next milestone and a portion after that. I'm not committing to 40 million. So what we used to, and again, they were smaller dollars, but at IDOS, we used to have quarterly portfolio reviews. And every quarter was either kill it now or give it another quarter. And we killed half of our development slate
Yep.
regularly. So when you say that the risks are bigger, are they really if you're only committing to the
It
milestone?
depends on the title, right? So if you have a day and date release of a movie, film, game that you want to put out there, it doesn't behoove you really to kill the title because you've got other people that are relying on that title to come out at a certain time frame. In the old days of day and date. Now, day and date used to be really critically important because there was a middle market that had to do with licensed product. And it worked beautifully, by the way. You could lob a Toy Story out there as long as the movie did well. There was this draft of community that came in to play your game. And I, a little bit off topic, but I think that the shift that I've seen from a number of years ago to today is it's more and more important to build, sustain, and nurture communities in early access, in a way to extend the longer tail of a title, and to feed in that community with a direct relationship with those customers. Whereas in the old days, we used to build up this big marketing campaign and then pump it out there and then wait for 3 months to see if the units flew out of the stores or not. I don't think we have the luxury to do that anymore. And if you look at things like PUBG and community-driven games that rely heavily on this passion of players coming in early on who want to be a part of actually designing and or shaping the game, I think that's more and more important in today's.
Like Star Citizen, where that's all people are paying to do for years and years and years and years and years. It's a fantastic model if you can do it. So, Peter, you're kind of in between. You're independent in the sense that there's not a big force behind you putting stuff in the market, but you're also internal in the sense that you're not going out and pitching all the time.
Yeah, we're sort of forced into our own a bit at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, two questions for you. I mean, one, and Ted mentioned this on the way in, is how do these guys have kind of the sword of Damocles over their heads to keep the teams motivated and moving on to the team. So when you're a semi-internal team, I know there's not unlimited resource, but you also don't have the swinging from vine to vine. How do you keep the team motivated?
Oh, of course. I don't think team motivation ever comes from the sort of Damocles, like, well, when you're the boss seat, yeah, you feel it. Oh, yes.
That's not just asking how he's got 300 employees.
Sat there long enough. I know just, we all know what it's like to feel the gun behind our head. That's daily life for that seat. But teams are motivated by belief in what they're doing. It's a belief in that there's a project that they're working alongside other people who are as good as them, but in different ways. They believe in each other and believe in the product that they're going after. So I think team motivation is, I'm just saying, it's a very different thing than the sort of the business level realities. So we'll have that challenge here, and you'd have that challenge independently, you have that challenge here. I do think it's very hard for any developer that isn't being driven by economic realities to create quite the same fire. That is a challenge. When Treyarch became internal Activision, we definitely faced some of that. But I think continuing sort of some of the external model internally there, where there's checks within the organization that create some of the same forces that would have been there on an external for an external team, I think is what sort of kept the business alignment in check. But really, it is incumbent on the upper management to set aggressive goals that the team has bought into, and then just drive. And they've got the passion has to flow down. They've got to believe that passion is there, that they're not being set up for unreasonable expectations, but that we're all in there to do something great, and that it's worth it, and that you're going to stay late, you're going to work hard, you're going to pour your passion and your best ideas into something because you believe it. Yeah. And that's true if you're working on a completely original IP, and it's true if you're working on it within the bounds of somebody else's IP. I mean, both historical lesson from Spider-Man, but certainly now with The Walking Dead. Yeah, that's not our invention, but it's a wonderful universe with a possibility there, and that can be just as much as of a creative commitment.
That's something you guys have always loved to do, is take other people's IP, and you've always been collaborative that way.
Yeah.
And I remember when the first meetings happened with Skydance, and when David Ellison came in, I wasn't a big believer in VR, and he gave the first plausible reason to start a VR publisher. To me, a lot of people were different. But he said that this was an opportunity, wide open market it, and an opportunity to create greatness on a realistic publisher and immediately be a market leader, and be a market leader, as opposed to something like console, which was expensive and crowded and all of this. Has the market developed the way you guys thought that it would, and has that opportunity afforded itself?
Well, I mean, the VR market, no one knew what the VR market was going to do, and the error on anybody's estimates would have far exceeded any accuracy of the estimate itself. Our passion for VR is absolutely undiminished, is what I can say. And I think that, thankfully, we're seeing investment in all sectors of VR continue to grow, actually, both in final product and core technology. Of course, more players jumping in, Microsoft jumping in, both at the PC level and on future Xbox. I think that it's going to take a while, and it's going to be people who've got real commitment to the space, and who can hang in there, who are going to be able to succeed. I think we're in a great spot to be that. We have vision from the very top about that VR is a new frontier of gaming, and that it's going to take a while to get it right, but when we do, it's going to be a compelling and permanent part of the landscape. And you're absolutely right. It's a chance for a new company to take new risks to get in there, and a reason for a new company to exist, really at all.
So Peter has the luxury of support in doing this. How do you, Steve and Ted, view the VR market? I know both of you have been in it and built stuff, but how do you see it rolling out in the future for you as a company?
Well, I think that we're working quite a bit with Oculus. I think you are as well. And I think what everyone was hoping to see with VR hasn't come to pass quite yet, which is what is that incredibly accessible mass market piece of hardware that people are going to be able to use and understand and get into very quickly.
Do you think it's hardware only, or do you think we figured out the software?
I think that we've figured out components of the software, but I think once that mass market hardware hits, you're going to have software released with it. And with regard to Oculus, they have 2 headsets coming out, both of which I think are going to address that mass market need, which is I want to be able to put this thing on, and I want to instantly be able to use it and work with it right away. The issue that we have right now is, whether it's Vive or it's Rift or it's Gear or any of these things, there are these barriers to getting into VR. Right? Whether it's setting up your room for Vive or sticking the motion sensors around for the Rift, or plugging your phone in the headset for the Gear, there's these barriers. Once those are removed, I think that's when people are going to have this moment where they're like, wow, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And then they're going to start engaging with the software that's made available at that time. And for us, we want to be at that point where people are looking to our games and going, that not only is this the coolest platform I've ever seen, but this is really compelling gameplay, this is a really compelling story, and I love this thing, and I'm going to buy it, and hopefully it takes off there. And for us, Oculus has been this amazing partner where they're allowing us to do things that we've never done before.
Are there other opportunities besides Oculus? You're out talking to publishers. Are other people willing to invest? I know Amazon's doing stuff in VR, but I don't know if that's your side of the company or that's under the games.
Yeah, we're exploring a bunch of different things as our platform.
Right.
VR as being one of them. We want to be kind of agnostic to the platform, so we want to support anything that's viable. Yeah. We have actually, Peter and those guys did a great job of displaying pwned it in our GDC booth a couple of years ago. And we had a nice display of VR in there as well through a partner. But it's to Steve's point, it's a tough model because of the inaccessibility.
Yeah, so Steve, do you think from an opportunity cost standpoint, is it worth it for you to put together a VR pitch to go out and try to pitch it?
At this stage, no, only because we're at full capacity for our teams. We've
Knock
had
on wood when you say that.
Yeah, well, thank you. We've had people come to us and ask us, would you be interested in putting together a pitch for this platform or that platform? And we're at a point where scaling up the team any further just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like we need to be able to handle the 2 projects we're currently on.
What about you, Ted?
Well, I want to talk about that opportunity. I think that one of the great things about VR and Oculus, as again, is a great partner for us too, is that it gives developers a chance to develop new IP where the risks are lower, financial risks are lower, and experiment and learn a little bit more about a different type of design. And especially as we get towards, as we move towards untethered headsets, there are more design lessons that we're going to learn and more opportunities for different types of virtual reality games that we couldn't quite make with the tethered version. I mean, of course, we don't want people running around their house and falling off of things, but the freedom and the weight and the new controllers, I think those are going to be opportunities for us to change, to help the landscape move forward in terms of design. So I look at VR for us as a chance for us to express our enthusiasm for this medium and to grow as a developer, grow just in terms of the IP library we have and our design skills. I think it's going to be huge. How's that? I mean, right now, I think all
I got a pair of ODG glasses here. I believe in it. I believe in it deeply.
Accessibility, right? I mean, accessibility, sociability, there's so many things that come with being able to see the world around you, and it's a different type of entertainment / education, training, communication that we're all looking towards. I think as somebody who is part of a design team, that's another chance to really rethink how we make games and experiences, because we've never ever thought about what would happen, or at least Insomniac has thought about what would happen if we put a game in our world. I mean, a few companies like Google have been doing it, and Nintendo, but for most of us out there, this is a new frontier, and it's exciting. That's why we're in games in the first place, is to jump on these types of opportunities.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a point in time where AR and VR converge into one headset that's going to be small enough and portable enough that perhaps I'm going to the ophthalmologist and I'm getting my prescription and they say, well, what sort of operating system do you want in your glasses? Obviously that's far off, but it seems like we're going to get to a point where that actually exists. So we haven't really explored AR just yet, but we know that that's going to be yet one more opportunity in the future. I think that, when I think about where we're at with VR, AR, MR, whatever letters you want to use, it reminds me of this time I went over to a friend's house, and his dad was a scientist, and he had a computer, and it had a modem. And that was the craziest thing I had ever seen, right? But again, the only way I got to access it is because this kid's dad was a scientist, right? And so as AR becomes more widespread, as VR becomes more widespread, that's at the point where we're going to be able to say, okay, AR is the thing that we know as game makers we can now explore.
The thing that's really going to break AR out is when we do move to head-worn. And there's a huge difference. I mean, it's not, there's really cool stuff being done on tablets and phones, but it's really not practical. I mean, one of your hands is tied up, and you're looking at the world through a little window. And it is transformative just to take a pair of glasses and put them on and have it on your face and have the world around you. And we're seeing stuff, games are a very, very, very small portion of actually breaking all of your data and your use cases out of from behind the glass and putting it into the real world. And the thing that we have to think about with AR is everything becomes contextual. So the access to the world's data information becomes contextual. So games are part of it, but also we have the opportunity to, and this is what we've been seeing a lot across industry as we move from a push-driven economy to an on-demand economy where consumers become in control. The tips and tricks and data analytics and tricks that we use to influence behavior based on real-time data in games that are really the only thing we do are moving into the real world. And as those move into AR, we're going to start to see placement of objects. And I remember you talked about your mind being blown. I'm sitting here working at IDOS, and we got the #1 game on the market, and we got knocked aside by Deer Hunter. And I'm thinking, John Voight movie? Vietnam? Deer Hunter? It wasn't that, though. It was laying it in the 8-bit grass and shooting deer. And I went out and looked at this game, and now all of a sudden I'm thinking about it in the context of AR again. Imagine AR Deer Hunter in the city. It's insane.
Somebody's going to make it.
Everything old is new again.
And
If they should.
More importantly, when you think about all the changes that have been coming about with analytics and big data and stuff like that, yet we're still using the same user interface that we've had for what, 40 years now? Like, it's kind of time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's funny, somebody showed this thing on the computer. They were showing how computers have evolved, and I just looked at it, wait, Windows looks the same.
Yeah.
It's been 30 years, it still looks the same. Okay, any more questions? We'll take one more, and then we'll let everybody go.
The question was, how do you think Ready Player One is going to affect the perception
In
of
the spirit
VR
of-
in the minds of consumers?
Yeah, as a moderator, I'll jump on this first and not let these guys talk. But in the spirit of everything old is new again, one of my second game client was Angel Studios, good friend of Dan's also. And Angel Studios did the 8 minutes of VR animation in the movie The Lawnmower Man. And that movie launched a VR wave that happened before most of you were born or sentient. And from 95, I mean, were you there for the Eisner pitch with the VR headset with Diego?
Not then, no.
Yeah, so from 95 to about 98, when they found some medical issues, there was, Hasbro had the Toaster project, Sega was gonna launch, Sega VR, Virtual Boy came out. So we did have that experience where Lawnmower Man, the movie, launched a big VR wave that never really happened. So the potential is there, but guys, what do you think?
My first reaction is disappointment. Because it's going to put the fantasy of it out there, this converged VR AR future experience that isn't really going to exist for a really long time. And so, in balance, of course, it's going to be wonderful, of course, because it's going to ram the idea even more into popular culture. It's going to put a lot of ideas. I'm sure it's going to inspire some great actual games but we're going to all feel the wave of like, whoa, and then, oh, you know, and then, but, oh, look at that. So that's a huge net win.
Whoa,
yeah.
Ooh.
I
Sounds like a
that
physical.
to happen. I actually think it's going to do a lot of good, going back to what I mentioned earlier and what Ted touched on with the untethered headsets, which will become, I don't know when the movie slate is. It's Christmas this year, isn't it? March. Okay, so, yeah, whatever. Given that it's coming out this year, given that you're going to see untethered headsets, you know, coming out this year, I think it will provide people who are coming out of that theater going, wow, this is super cool, to potentially want to go, you know, go onto Amazon and order, you know, an Oculus Go is going to be, I think they announced the price at like $200 or something. If they're really inspired by the movie, there is potential for them to suddenly want to try that out, and it's going to be at a price point that's going to be accessible. So I do think that the movie's going to help.
I think the only thing I'll add is that when you're using VR, it's very different, right, than watching a movie and seeing a movie from a protagonist perspective. So there's definitely going to be, I think, that disconnect for people to overcome, because watching a protagonist move through these virtual, beautiful environments is very different than having a headset on and being the protagonist. So I don't know how that's going to play out. I'm sure some people will be, as Peter was saying, disappointed, but other people this will be their entry point into VR, as Steve was saying. Yeah, I'm just repeating what you guys said. So.
All of us here are old enough to not only have gone to arcades, but also seen Tron.
Right.
And when we went to see Tron, we weren't really expecting to go inside the video game and, you know, be driving the light cycle. So I think that the difference between what people are seeing in this movie and what they're going to experience in real life won't result in that disappointment. I think it's going to be something that captures the imagination and then gets them excited about the potential.
I'll add one additional piece to that. I think that depending on how the script is written and the language used, the nomenclature, there is a benefit in creating a common language. And we find that in games, we find it in other parts of entertainment. Understanding the inside language of a thing helps us feel more intimately connected to it, and it makes it feel more comfortable to pursue it. I read the book. There's nothing in the book that lets me believe that that's going to be a mass market nomenclature that people are going to embrace. But the movie does have a mass market effect, and if they're able to create a language or to support a language that helps more people understand what we do and how to better access what these guys do, then I think it could be a benefit, but it's probably a long tail, in my humble opinion.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really enjoyed this. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for coming out and sharing with everybody on the least casual development panel of Casual Connect. And thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you, guys.